The skyline of Manhattan looked like a chessboard from the top floor of the Vance Global penthouse, and Tristan Vance was tired of playing with pawns. He stood by the glass, adjusting the cuffs of his bespoke suit, his expression as cold as the storm outside. He had built his empire on ruthlessness, but his latest acquisition, a massive merger with the conservative Pendleton Group, had hit a wall. Arthur Pendleton was a man of old-fashioned values. He refused to hand over his legacy to a notorious bachelor, known for leaving a trail of broken hearts and empty promises. He wanted a family man, a man of stability. Harrison Cole, Tristan's business partner and oldest confidant, threw a thick folder onto the mahogany desk. Harrison leaned back, a calculating smirk on his face. "The deal is slipping away, Tristan. Pendleton wants a respectable high society fiancé, someone with pedigree, someone who proves you are ready to settle down." Tristan turned away from the window, his jaw tight. "Then find one. Call that elite agency. I want a woman who can play the part of a spoiled old money heiress. Pay her whatever she wants, sign an ironclad non-disclosure agreement, and bring her to my office by tomorrow." Miles away in a cramped, drafty apartment in Brooklyn, Ilara Thorne was staring at a pile of past-due bills. Just 3 years ago, her life had been a dream. Her father had run a successful logistics company, and she had grown up in the very circles Tristan Vance dominated. But a devastating corporate sabotage had wiped them out overnight, leaving her father broken and her working double shifts at a diner just to keep the heat on. When the phone rang, it was an offer that sounded like a cruel joke. A discreet casting agency, knowing her background in theatre and her former high society life, offered her a fortune for a 1-month contract. The catch was simple. She had to pretend to be a wealthy, eccentric heiress and act as the devoted fiancée of a billionaire. She needed the money. Her pride had long since been pawned to pay for her father's medical treatments. The next morning, Ilara walked into the towering glass fortress of Vance Global. She wore a borrowed designer dress, her chin held high, channeling the arrogance she used to despise in her former wealthy friends. Tristan looked up from his laptop as she entered. His dark eyes scanned her from head to toe, dissecting her like a balance sheet. "You are the actress," he said, his voice dripping with bored condescension. "You look the part. I will give you that. But Pendleton is a shark. He will see right through a cheap performance. You need to act like you have never worked a day in your life. Can you handle that?" Ilara crossed the room, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. She leaned over his desk, meeting his cold stare with a fiery intensity. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice smooth and dripping with mock superiority, "I am not here to audition for your approval. I am here to do a job. You need a rich, entitled fiancé to save your merger. I can play the part so well you will start believing it yourself. Just make sure the check clears." Tristan blinked, momentarily thrown off balance. Women usually withered under his gaze, but this girl was looking at him as if he were the hired help. A slow, dangerous smile spread across his face. "We have an agreement, Miss Thorne. Do not disappoint me." The contract was signed that afternoon. By Friday night, they were stepping out of a black limousine and into the blinding flash of paparazzi cameras. It was the annual Pendleton Charity Gala, the official debut of their fake engagement. Tristan placed a heavy hand on the small of her back, guiding her through the sea of flashing lights. "Smile, darling," he murmured near her ear, his breath warm against her skin. "The whole world is watching." Ilara flashed a dazzling camera-ready smile, looking every bit the untouchable heiress. She mingled with the elite, effortlessly discussing art, vintage wine and summer homes in the Hamptons. Tristan watched her from across the ballroom, genuinely stunned. She knew which fork to use, how to address foreign dignitaries, and exactly how to deflect probing questions. It was not just acting. It was as if she truly belonged in this world. But as the night wore on, Harrison Cole approached Tristan, his eyes fixed on Ilara. "Where exactly did you find her, Tristan?" Harrison asked, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "She is almost too perfect. It makes me wonder what she is hiding." "Keep your suspicions to yourself, Harrison," Tristan replied sharply, though a seed of doubt had been planted in his own mind. When the gala finally ended, the doors of the penthouse elevator slid shut, cutting them off from the world. The moment they were alone, Ilara reached up and unclasped the heavy diamond necklace from her throat. She tossed it casually onto a velvet armchair, kicking off her heels with a heavy sigh. Tristan frowned, watching the elegant heiress instantly transform into an exhausted woman. "You should be more careful with that," he warned. "That necklace is worth more than your life." Ilara turned to face him, her eyes flashing with a sudden, raw anger. "Keep your diamonds, Mr. Vance. I am here to play a part for the public, not for you. You bought my time, not my dignity." She walked away, leaving Tristan standing alone in the luxurious silence, realizing that the woman he had hired was a much more complicated puzzle than he had ever anticipated. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear a good love story. Subscribe to the channel to follow the next parts of this journey. We will see you in the next one. The days that followed turned the penthouse into a battlefield of polite whispers and sharp glances. Tristan and Ilara were masters of their public performance, dazzling investors and charming Arthur Pendleton at every elite dinner. But behind closed doors, the silence was deafening. Tristan was a man used to absolute control, and Ilara refused to surrender an inch of her independence. The tension boiled over one afternoon when a team of personal stylists arrived at the penthouse, carrying racks of designer gowns and diamond jewelry. Tristan stood by the grand piano, expecting her to be thrilled. Instead, Ilara ordered the stylists to leave. She marched up to him, her eyes burning with defiance. She told him she was not a doll he could dress up to soothe his ego, and she would not accept extravagant gifts that were meant to buy her submission. Tristan, furious and fascinated, realized his wealth meant absolutely nothing to her. Yet, the forced proximity began to chip away at their armor. One evening, after a grueling 4-hour dinner with the Pendleton board, Tristan found Ilara asleep on the library sofa. She had been studying the merger documents just to ensure she could hold her own in conversations, exhausting herself for a company that was not even hers. Tristan walked over quietly. Without a word, he draped a cashmere throw over her shoulders, his fingers lingering for a fraction of a second against her hair. He noticed the dark circles under her eyes and felt a strange, unfamiliar ache in his chest. It was a quiet moment of care, completely stripped of his usual arrogance. But the fragile peace was destined to shatter. Harrison Cole, Tristan's ruthless partner, had been watching Ilara closely. Harrison despised her effortless charm and the softening effect she was having on Tristan. Determined to protect his own interests, Harrison hired a private investigator. The truth exploded on a rainy Tuesday evening. Tristan had returned to the penthouse early, holding a heavy manila folder Harrison had slammed onto his desk hours before. Ilara walked into the living room, freezing when she saw the look of absolute shock on his face. He threw the folder onto the glass coffee table. Glossy photographs of her working at a rundown diner spilled out, alongside a financial dossier. He demanded to know who she really was, his voice dangerous and low. He asked why a woman who knew the exact vintage of a rare Bordeaux was scrubbing tables in Brooklyn. Ilara did not flinch. She did not cry. She stood tall, her pride radiating in the dimly lit room. She asked him if he remembered a company called Thorn Logistics. Tristan froze. Thorn Logistics was a proud family-owned shipping empire that Vance Global had aggressively destroyed in a hostile takeover 3 years ago. The realization hit him like a physical blow. She was the daughter of the man his company had ruined. She looked at him with a pain that cut deeper than any blade. She explained that she had lost her home, her future, and her father's health because of his endless greed. She had taken this job, she confessed, simply to survive the financial ruin he had created. The revelation broke something fundamental between them. For the next week, the penthouse felt like a tomb. There were no more arguments, only a heavy, suffocating silence. Tristan was consumed by guilt. He discovered that the hostile takeover of Thorn Logistics had been orchestrated entirely by Harrison Cole while Tristan was out of the country, but it had been done under the banner of Vance Global. The blood was on his hands. He did not try to fix it with money or apologies. He knew she would reject both. Instead, his repentance became silent. He remembered that she drank her coffee black with a single cube of sugar, and every morning a perfect cup was waiting on the kitchen counter before she woke up. He cancelled his high-profile evening meetings just to sit in the library while she read, giving her space but offering his quiet presence. But while Tristan was trying to find a way to heal the wounds he had caused, a new threat was rising. Harrison Cole realized that Tristan was distracted and vulnerable. The final board meeting with Arthur Pendleton was only days away, and Harrison saw his opportunity. He planned to expose Ilara as a fraud in front of the entire board, blaming Tristan for the deception. Harrison intended to use the scandal to oust Tristan from his own company and take control of the Pendleton merger himself. The storm was gathering, and as Friday approached, Ilara and Tristan were completely unaware of the trap that was waiting to destroy them both. If this journey has captured your imagination, share it with someone who appreciates a story of redemption and love. Subscribe to the channel to make sure you do not miss the final chapter of their story. See you next time. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom closed, sealing Tristan, Ilara, Arthur Pendleton, and the entire executive board inside. The air was thick with anticipation. Pendleton was ready to sign the final merger documents, cementing Vance Global's dominance. But before Tristan could uncap his pen, Harrison Cole stood up at the end of the long mahogany table. A smug, triumphant smile twisted his face. Harrison tossed a stack of glossy photographs across the polished wood, scattering images of Ilara wiping down tables in her stained diner uniform. He announced to the room that the elegant heiress they all admired was nothing but a hired fraud, a desperate waitress brought in to trick Arthur Pendleton into signing away his legacy. Gasps echoed through the room. Pendleton looked at Tristan, his face flushed with betrayal, demanding an explanation. Ilara sat perfectly still. Her heart was pounding, but she kept her chin high, refusing to let Harrison see her bleed. But before she could speak, Tristan slowly stood up. He did not look panicked. He looked lethal. He calmly buttoned his suit jacket and turned his piercing gaze to his partner. Tristan admitted to the board that Ilara had been hired, but he did not stop there. He pulled a black leather folder from his briefcase and slid it directly to Arthur Pendleton. Tristan explained that while investigating the origins of Ilara's financial ruin, he uncovered a massive web of corporate fraud orchestrated entirely by Harrison Cole. The documents detailed illegal offshore accounts, forged signatures, and the ruthless, unauthorized sabotage of Thorn Logistics. Tristan's voice was like ice as he exposed every lie. Harrison's smug smile vanished, replaced by a pale, trembling panic. He tried to deny it, stuttering and looking around for allies, but the board members turned away in disgust. Security guards stepped into the room, their presence requested by Tristan an hour before the meeting began. Harrison was escorted out of the building in complete disgrace, stripped of his shares, his title, and his dignity. Pendleton, shocked but impressed by Tristan's uncompromising integrity and transparency, signed the merger without another word. Hours later, the penthouse was quiet. The storm had passed. Ilara stood by the window, looking out at the city lights, packing her small bag. Her contract was over. The truth was out. There was no reason for her to stay. She heard the soft click of the door as Tristan walked into the room. He did not ask her to stay with empty promises. Instead, he placed a thick legal envelope gently onto the glass table. He told her to open it. Inside was a transfer of ownership. Tristan had bought back every single asset of Thorn Logistics. He had restored the company's name and transferred total control back to her father and her. Ilara looked up, tears finally breaking through her composed facade. Tristan stepped closer, closing the distance between them. He told her that he had spent his whole life acquiring things that did not matter, building an empire that felt empty until she walked into it. He did not want a fake engagement or a contract. He wanted her exactly as she was, fiercely proud and incredibly brave. He asked for her forgiveness not as a billionaire, but as a man who had finally found something worth fighting for. Ilara looked into his eyes and saw the absolute truth. She dropped the papers and closed the space between them, pulling him into a kiss that erased the pain of the past. It was a promise, real and unbreakable. A year passed, bringing a gentle spring to the city. Ilara sat behind her own mahogany desk at the newly restored Thorn Logistics headquarters. She reviewed the final quarterly reports, smiling at the steady growth. The door to her office opened, and Tristan walked in, carrying 2 cups of coffee. He set one down on her desk, black with a single sugar cube exactly the way she liked it. He leaned down, pressing a soft kiss to the top of her head. They had built an empire together, not on deceit, but on trust, mutual respect, and a love that survived the darkest storms. As she looked out at the city skyline, she knew she was exactly where she was meant to be. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear a good story of love and redemption. Subscribe to the channel to accompany the next stories. We will see you in the next one.
Editor. The infographic presents Tristan and Ilara's story as a journey from control and deception to responsibility, trust, and emotional transformation. At the beginning, their relationship is not based on love. Tristan hires Ilara to pretend to be his fiancée because Arthur Pendleton refuses to approve a major merger unless Tristan appears stable and committed. This arrangement immediately introduces one of the central psychological conflicts of the story. Tristan treats relationships as business transactions, while Ilara protects her independence and refuses to let his money define her value. Tristan represents control, emotional distance, and the belief that every problem can be solved through influence or wealth. Ilara represents dignity, resilience, and personal autonomy. Although she accepts the contract because she needs money for her father's medical care, she never accepts the idea that Tristan owns her. Her confidence often appears sharp or confrontational, but the infographic explains that this pride is a form of psychological protection. She has lost her family's company, her social position, and her financial security. Her strength protects the pain and humiliation she carries beneath the surface. Their fake engagement also reveals how social class can be performed. Ilara knows how to speak with wealthy guests, discuss art and wine, and behave naturally at elite events because she once belonged to that world. Her ability to appear wealthy shows that status is often maintained through clothing, language, manners, and reputation. However, the story also demonstrates that intelligence, dignity, suffering, and personal worth cannot be measured by income or social position. The gala becomes the first major turning point because Tristan realizes that Ilara is far more complex than the actress he believed he had hired. She performs perfectly, yet she refuses to become a decorative accessory. This challenges the expectations placed on women in powerful social environments, where appearance and obedience are often valued more than independence and intelligence. The emotional conflict deepens when Tristan discovers that Ilara is the daughter of the family whose company was destroyed under the name of Vance Global. This revelation forces him to confront the consequences of corporate power. The destruction of Thorn Logistics was not simply a financial event. It damaged a family, destroyed security, and contributed to her father's declining health. The story therefore questions a business culture that celebrates profit while ignoring the human cost of its decisions. Tristan's guilt becomes meaningful only when it leads to change. Instead of relying entirely on money or dramatic apologies, he begins to show care through consistent actions. He remembers how Ilara drinks her coffee, gives her emotional space, and quietly investigates what happened to her family. These moments show that true repentance requires responsibility and behavior, not only words. The boardroom confrontation represents the moment when truth defeats reputation. Harrison attempts to expose Ilara as a fraud, but Tristan reveals Harrison's corruption, illegal accounts, forged documents, and role in destroying Thorn Logistics. By defending Ilara and accepting his own responsibility, Tristan finally chooses integrity over power. The restoration of Thorn Logistics completes the transformation. Returning the company is not a romantic gift but an act of justice. By the end, their relationship becomes real because both characters are finally honest and emotionally vulnerable. The story teaches that love cannot grow through control, performance, or dependence. It becomes possible when dignity is respected, wrongdoing is repaired, and trust is built through truth, accountability, and mutual respect.